Hello guys, in our last video we saw how we can define function-based middlewares and what are their use cases and how we can execute a function before the request receives the controller function and how we can modify the response of our request and add additional details to our response. Now we will see how we can chain these middleware functions and how we can run multiple type of middlewares in a chain, in a sequence. And this we will see on app level. And later on, we will see how we can apply these middlewares on a particular route level as well, specific to routes. So let's get started. So now we already have these two functions. We will for now comment them and we will define a new folder which will store code for the middlewares that we are going to define. So let's name this folder as middlewares. Now inside this, we will create a new module and name it middleware for now. And now inside this module, we will be defining some of the classes, middleware classes, which we are going to use inside our init.py. So we will first define class named as base middleware. In this class, we will define two of the methods. One will be before and second will be after. Now, because this has a response, we will return this response. Okay, and I will just remove this request part, and I will just keep it before and after. Okay, now this class will serve as a parent class or base class for the other middleware classes that we have to define. So now let's define our actual classes that we are going to use. So first we'll be defining the request logger as we're getting a type hint. So I will just define a request logger, and in this I will only define a before method which will just log the request that we have. Okay, I will be removing this request parameter here, and I will just print the request type and the request path that we're getting. Or I'm just thinking whether we should print all of it. Okay, so here we will be printing the request method and request path. I will just remove this part and I will here write the request, or let me write like this, logging request. And now from the Flask we will import our request and response. This is fine. And now let's go ahead and define our one more class, and we will name it as let's name it as custom response middleware. Okay, so this will do as earlier we defined our after method before this, and we were doing pretty much the same thing here. So we'll be just printing out the status code and the data, and then we'll be attaching the unique ID to it. So let's go ahead and import this as well. So this is the UUID, and apart from that, let's add one more new header to this and name it, let me remove this, name it something called as app version. Okay, so now we have two middlewares defined. I would like to define one more middleware, and let's call it as auth middleware, and this authorization will only check the header if our header is present. And let's remove this one. So now we have three middlewares defined. One is the request middleware, second is the authorization, which will check that each of our request has authorization header included in it. Otherwise it will simply throw us the authorization error. And then we have the custom middleware, which will append some extra information to the response that we originally had. Okay, now we will be defining one function now which will register these middlewares. Okay, because right now if we try to use them directly, we won't be able to, because Flask won't understand these type of classes. So now, having defined our middleware classes, we will now define a plugin, or we would say a helper function, which will register all of these middlewares. Because currently if you try to use these middleware classes directly with Flask, you won't be able to, because Flask won't be able to handle these classes or able to register these classes as middleware. Okay, so now let's go ahead and write a middleware class, and then we will just remove this portion of code, and this class will take two parameters as constructor parameters. First will be the app, and second one will be the middlewares. Okay, now this one will keep as required parameter, and here I will just populate it with middleware, and this will be the app. Now I will define one method here which I will name as register middlewares, and inside of this middleware we will first perform a simple check that will basically iterate through each middleware that we have, and inside each middleware we'll perform a check. As we are getting a type end, we'll perform a check that if the middleware has a before method on it, and also we will see if that before method is callable. Okay, and if that is the case, we will define two of the empty arrays before it, or I would say list. So I will call it as before, and I will name it as after hooks. So if this condition is true, I will simply append this particular parameter to it. And similarly, we will do the same for the after one as well. So what we are doing here is we are just making a list of all the after and before methods that we have available on all of the middleware classes. Here, let's fill in the missing condition that we have. Now, since we have now passed the check, let me remove this. The hints are going crazy here. And now let me simply register each of the hook that we have. So what we will do now is we have this app attribute present on our class instance or class variable. So what we are going to do is we are going to register each of these methods using our before request decorator that we already have present on the Flask. And similarly, we will be registering all of the after methods as well that we have defined on each of the middleware classes. Okay, so what we are basically doing is first we are performing validation on each of the methods, middleware classes methods. We are checking that each of the method is present and is callable, and then we are simply registering them as actual middleware functions. Okay, now you can see here it's just going through each of the before method here. So basically hook is a before method for each of the classes. Then it's checking that if it's simply calling it, and it's checking that if we are getting the response, then it's simply returning the response. And the same we'll be doing for the after as well. Okay, so since after is after request, it takes a response, so that's why we are passing a response attribute to this response parameter. Okay, so this looks good. Now what we will do is we have commented this code here. We will try to import this. We will try to import the middleware manager, and then we will import all of our middlewares that we have. And here, what we are going to do is we are going to first define a middleware. We'll pass the app, and we are going to pass all of our middlewares that we have defined. And then we will simply call the register middleware on it. Now, for some reason, it's not taking them. Yeah, because the import is wrong here. Okay, so here we are getting an error saying that you cannot import a DB from partialized. Okay, to resolve this, what we can do is we can simply copy this inside of our init method that we have. Okay, so there has been a mistake. We have by mistake copied all the content of our init module inside our init file. So just let's go ahead and remove this. And now let's go back to our init.py, and here we will just try to restart our service. Okay, so now you can see we have registered all of our middleware classes here. Okay, now if we open the Postman and let's try to make a call here, you can see straight away our middlewares are functioning properly because we have received an authorization header error. That means the second middleware isn't active. It has returned us error saying that we were not able to send any valid token to it. That's why it failed. But if you see, the other middlewares are also in action. That means the request middleware also worked. It was able to process the request, able to log request, and then at the end, our response middleware also worked because it was able to append the response ID and app version to it. If you go here and list the headers that you have, you will be able to see that now we have an app version, response ID, and what else we are content type that we already have. Okay, so this way we can chain middlewares in Flask application. Now in our next video, we will see how we can apply these middlewares on route level. So right now what you see is these middlewares were defined on the application level. So that means they will intercept all the requests. On route level, they will only intercept those defined set of routes on which you will apply these middlewares. And then we will also see how we can use middlewares defined using WGI configuration. When you are deploying your application on production grade, you will be using servers like Ubicon or WGI modules instead of using your built-in servers.